This I love. This I've been noticing this one a lot more. So what's happening here to get this breathy sound is the same thing that actually happens when we hear more traditional flute-like sounds from falsetto. What's happening here is an intentional stiffening of the folds, which allows air to escape, giving us that breathy tone, that whispery tone, but it simultaneously allows the folds to oscillate. And so it's not falsetto in the way that we're used to it up in the high end, but you can bring some of the same qualities that create falsetto, namely like the stiffening of the folds and the lack of full adduction, and you can bring that into your low end, and it gives it immense vulnerability. It's a very, very fragile sound, and I mean that like in a good way, right? It expresses fragility. And so that's what we're seeing a little bit here. And then I love how at the end of the phrase, she brings it in from a hum. Speaks the truth. The way that she comes in at the end of that phrase, getting closer to the microphone and having almost like a humming thing going on, is in contrast. You turn around and touch my arm. This breathy, fragile, vulnerable kind of expressive sound. The moment speaks the truth. Truth is the word that she chooses to give strength. Musically, it makes sense in terms of the phrasing, but more importantly, it makes sense with the words. And that's something where I think Lara Fabian is, like, her technique is phenomenal, don't get me wrong. I would struggle to, like, it would be hard to find people that could compete with her on technique alone. But we have to forget that that's not the point of music, right? As much as I might love it, as much as you might love it, her artistry is very, very, very hard to top. I know you. I'm sorry to break this phrase up. There's something I'm noticing more and more about Lara Fabian that reminds me, oh, I need to work on that. I don't recognize it a lot in other singers who do actually do it as well. So with this phrase, notice how she's like keening like that. She is so good when it comes to her physical movement with singing. Like, there are schools of thought, there are methods of acting, of singing approaches that do involve a lot of body work, and I see that a lot with her. You can actually see this motion where she's keening through this phrase, and it's so appropriate. I want to go back to this part. I know you. How beautiful is this? I literally have chills. How beautiful is this? It's so simple, but it's so gorgeous, and I think one of the reasons it's so noticeable. I know you. It's so gentle in comparison to what she was doing prior. It's a simple change of the lips and of the vowel, and she does a little bit of something different with the mic technique, but this is why, like, when you have a super good singer and a super great performance, you can learn so much from every little moment. There was nothing else I'd ever want. Little bit of a high larynx. False folds are coming in a little bit, not too much, just like almost more speech-like. So this is retracted false folds in a world, right? Like, you get really big sound. If you take a cup of coffee or something that you like to smell, and boom, that's your false fold separating. You feel your throat opening there. But if we're having like a more conversational, speech-like, use of the false folds, you're going to get this. If you slightly constrict them, you get a tight, tight sound. And so she's giving it a little bit of a constriction, the false folds. And she's still doing that breathy thing a little bit. I know you. It is not often that you want to give emphasis on a pronoun. It can sound you can miss the point. Let me get an example. So this is a bit of a Shakespeare monologue. I'm not going to like belabor the point, but I will punch the pronouns here, and then I want you to see if you can make sense of what I'm saying. Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I! Is it not monstrous that this player here, but in a fiction, in a dream of passion, could force his soul to do his own conceit? See what I mean? That's just, that doesn't communicate anything. Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. Like that you can understand more, right? And so, and while that tends to be, of course, a little bit more subjective, I think Shakespeare is is a really good parallel to singing, because if you really sit down and think of the words, you can get moments like this where you give slight emphasis. In this moment, the operative word is you. It's about, it's a longing. That's the tune is about. It's about love. And the specific phrase, she chooses to use you and gives it this delicateness and lovingness that she hasn't given the words prior. From here, I've waited for you to appear. And so, and she just keeps doing it throughout the phrases. Like she's really, really, really keyed in to the words. Not from here, not from this here and now. I want to actually counter something that I know that some people will have on their mind as a possible critique. The breathing that you're hearing, a lot of teachers would say, this is bad. You don't want to catch breath. You don't want to do that. But a lot of voice teachers have no concept of what compression or audio is. She's not, that's not what she's doing. Even the slightest bit of sound like that, because of the amount of compression that's in the signal chain, and compression is simple enough to explain. So I actually have a compressor right here. So I'm going to show you all what it's going to look like over time. So I've just lowered it significantly, and we're going to record. I had to re-record it, which stinks. So what compression does is it will take the lows, like low volume here, it will increase the volume, whereas the high volume stuff, it will lower the volume, hence compressing the waveform. This is a nice, when you get your compression up to a certain level, it has this like sausage effect. That's what a lot of people call this. Because you're sausaging, you're just making everything kind of one uniform thing here, right? But the reason why this is significant is it will actually, it won't just do this for specific volume. It has that effect across the entire spectrum of audible frequencies. So what you're seeing here, right? Not a lot of white noise, not a lot of higher frequencies, right? Then we get over to here. Definitely a lot more visible higher frequencies. Usually, in a track or a wave file, higher frequencies are not as big and large. I don't quite know the reason why, but like you look at any graph, like an orchestra graph, like there's a lot of unoccupied space in the higher end of things. So because those have their own volume, they too get compressed. They too are increased. Another great example is if you ever listen to a track from the band Muse, same thing. Same thing. S's, when you have high compression and you don't have a de-esser, right? You can probably hear these S's from me right now, and they're obnoxious. So that's what compression does. Therefore, when you hear her doing catch breaths, they're not really catch breaths. They sound like it, but they're not. Sorry. This is beautiful mic technique. This is such a learning moment. She's going to stiffen the folds to get that breathy sound. Then she's going here closer to it and then literally opening her mouth up against the microphone. Then she gives a tilt to add volume and vibrato, and then the sound person adds a little nice delay kind of reverb thing. Delay, not reverb. But this is interesting because we talked about compression not giving us room to have dynamic range, right? So how is it getting louder? So one of the things we can control, even when there is compression, is adding and removing frequencies. So here's what I mean. So I took my compressor largely off for this, and notice how you can see more easily how the volume increases on the waveform, right? It's a little bit harder to see how the frequencies are getting louder. You can see on the bottom specifically. There we go. Where are you? So you can see on the bottom, there we go, that this does get brighter over time. And on a spectrogram, which is what this is, the brighter the frequency, the louder. So, and that's, I didn't change my volume. I got closer to the mic, which has two effects. Obviously, the proximity of the sound is louder if it's closer. I think that's kind of easy to intuit. But you also get the proximity effect, which boosts the lows. Let's switch this around. Let's turn the compressor all the way up again. Pause. Nice. Almost didn't make it. So, so the thing that changes, that adds the volume, and you can see it with the waveform to a degree, right? So it doesn't entirely go away. But one of the things that we're seeing right here is that we're adding frequencies, right? It's in this area where things go away, right? This is the end when I'm being very gentle and my face is away from the microphone. This is when my face is pretty close to the microphone. You can see that below there, it's unnoticeable. You don't see the frequencies. So it's not necessarily that the volume doesn't come from louder notes. It comes from taking away or adding frequencies. And that just happens when you get closer to a microphone and you're singing with tons of compression. Interestingly enough, there is some correlation here with projecting over an orchestra. That's a totally different conversation. But I think this is very useful to know, because when you have so much compression, you really have to take these kind of extreme approaches to get any dynamics. And Lara Fabian, who is an amazing musician, understands this. And so she's going at great lengths to try and create dynamics when there's so much compression, which there has to be. And I'll get into that too. Again, there's that keening, that physical movement. I think that's a great thing to practice, by the way. I haven't filmed it because it's horrendous. I don't think anyone wants to watch it. But I did the like Beyonce, like put a ring on it, hip movement while doing some singing. Helped really, really well. But I did it in private because I respect the safety of everything and everyone around me. No one, first of all, nobody needs to see it, and there's the risk that someone might get hurt. Anyway. Of time, but I can hold you in my mind. That is why there needs to be so much compression. The volume difference for this is immense. If you were right next to her face while she was doing this, that would be a whisper. That would be you like going like, oh, that's loud. That's the stark difference. So that's why compression is important here. And you just see it throughout the entire performance. This is like, yes. Yes. This is the mic technique here is constant. And it's so tied to the music. It is awesome. It inspires awe. I love this. Right there, that's an instance of mic technique. Right there, that's an instance of mic technique. That's an instance of mic technique. She's so deliberate with it. And you have to be. And it's you're going phrase by phrase to make musical and technical decisions. And then you're adding the complexity on top of it to be able to take away the microphone. The microphone becomes an instrument, an effects board, right? And you have to treat it in tandem with the musical phrasing. And she's a masterclass on this. My dogs know how to ruin everything that's beautiful. Give me a minute. All right, we got to talk about it. This is beautiful. What you're about to hear are a lot of different high notes. Now, mostly she's using belting. Let's brief explanation of what that is. So what belting is this is the cricoid cartilage. There are two theories circling around on this, but the more widely popular belief is that this tilts upwards. And in tilting upwards, you're actually taking the vocal folds, which are right here, and you're shortening them, right? This comes up, and so the motion is that, and so then the folds kind of get shorter and thicker. That creates the power that we're so familiar with belting. Oftentimes, singers, including myself, can get extremely purist about a note. I'll hit a high note, but I won't be satisfied unless I hold it out at full volume for like 8 bars. You know, not 8 bars, maybe like a bar or two, right? And without that, I'm not happy with it. But what I respect about Lara Fabian is that she will go into these hyper extremes of her range and be okay with the fact that she's not sustaining it, and that she's just kind of touching it. And she uses it for musical effect. It's not like she can't do it. It takes a level of confidence. And I'll point it out specifically. All right. Right here. It doesn't matter that note, that specific note wasn't prepared to go through that phrase sustained. Can she sustain a belt like that? Sure. No, 100%. She can do it. Try to imagine the phrase with that. It's all of a sudden you're like, oh, that doesn't sound as good. Like, it's now, right? The word is now. You kind of lose the meaning of the word when you go, here and now, right? Like, it's weird, isn't it? It's kind of contrived. And so that's why I think this is really cool, is that she'll do something that is, something singers get conscious about and embarrassed with, right? But she'll do it because it works. It makes sense with the words. And this is really, we should watch her as singers and try to borrow, I guess that's a word, I don't know, try to borrow her courage. Steal her courage? I don't know, just be as courageous as her. Simple asks. This is another really great example of this. Right? Same thing. Just, but like, that's weird, right? Think of an argument that you're having. I want you to solve this now. If you would just, right? That is more accurate to what you would do. And that's why it's very compelling to make those decisions. Then she gets on the word fly. Finally, a word that can soar. A note that can soar. This is probably reading too much into it, this next thought, but the idea of holding out the note fly and then decrescendo as if you're watching someone or something go off into the distance and you see less and less and then they disappear. That's, did she mean to do that? Was it a musical decision? She could totally just justify it musically, right? It makes sense. The phrasing of it makes sense. But when I listen to great artists, I'm like, it just makes me think a little bit more. And I think there's something to be said about that, where she's so specific with the words. And it's not that we have to justify and define necessarily what she's doing, but it's important as singers that we draw inspiration from immaculate, amazing singers like Lara Fabian. So I'm going to leave you with that thought. And now I'm going to go watch more Lara.